Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leon Cook. I'm the founder of Atticus Partners, and welcome to our latest iteration of the Ask Atticus podcast. I'm joining you today from Manchester, from Conservative Party conference, and I'm joined as ever by Peter Cardwell, Senior Counsel to Atticus, former SPAD extraordinaire, author, and Talk TV presenter. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Leon. Great to be with you.
So, Peter, an interesting conference, 1 year into Kemi Badenoch's leadership. The theme for the conference this week was a strong economy, stronger borders. How do you think it's landed?
Well, both those messages I think have landed pretty well. There've been a few distractions, of course, but nonetheless, I think some of that message has come through. Certainly, there's a lot of pressure on her, of course. The 3rd of November is the first time when Kemi Badenoch can be challenged. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think they'll give her at least until the local elections. But certainly today, Robert Jenrick's speech was very well received. It was certainly a full hall. Quite a number of people leaving today. Obviously, fewer people here when the Conservative Party, is in opposition when they're in government. But nonetheless, it certainly hasn't been the ghost town that it has been portrayed to some degree. And I think a number of those messages actually are getting through. And actually, for such a long time, for many, many months now, there have been a reluctance to say what policies are. In fact, we've had quite a few of them from the Conservatives over the last few days. That is coming through, and people are, certainly in the political world anyway, taking a bit of notice of them. I wonder in the wider public how much will actually get through.
Well, I agree with you. I've obviously seen many of the shadow cabinet here this week, but the two ever-present personalities, I think, are Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly, who've been very visible in their appearances at various fringe meetings. Do you think, as it currently stands, that the Conservative Party and those behind the scenes have looked at what happened last week in Liverpool with Andy Burnham, and that in the event that you've got Kemi basically saying, give me the chance, give me the time, and that they don't, there are those that would otherwise want to change, but they've decided to, now is not the right time to do anything, basically.
That's exactly what's happened. And yeah, I mean, I don't think Robert Jennings was ever seriously going to consider challenge Kemi Badenoch at this exact moment. He, of course, remains at least, if not more popular than she does, but he's not overt. And he actually hasn't strayed off his brief to a huge degree. It's quite interesting that he has spoken quite a lot about justice issues, about home affairs issues that he could be expected to talk about in his brief. Previously, on a number of occasions, he has had all sorts of things to say about all sorts of issues which really aren't in his sort of bailiwick as Shadow Justice Secretary. So I think there has been a toning down. It's certainly a focusing of the message. Obviously, you have lots of Shadow cabinet members who have at least some profile or at least a speaking slot here at conference. That, of course, they don't get nearly the same level of publicity as Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch, but certainly the lesson has been learned from last week. I think Andy Burnham is someone who a lot of Labour people feel very resentful towards for overshadowing their conference to some degree, and he left with his tail between his legs. He actually left the conference venue in Liverpool about 5 minutes before Keir Starmer spoke. So I find that very interesting, whereas I think there will be a show of unity tomorrow with Kemi Badenoch, and certainly nothing Robert Jenrick has said policy-wise anyway, and our James Cleverly has said policy-wise, has caused her any trouble whatsoever.
A very clear theme has come out of this conference. So Mel Stride's speech, Shadow Chancellor, is talking about a push towards fiscal realism, announcing £47 billion worth of spending cuts in the event that the Conservatives were to form the next government. Things that have been long held, the idea of 0.7% of to foreign aid, they're committing now to reduce that down to literally 0.1%. At the same time, providing the feel-good factor for the younger voters, £5,000 national insurance rebate for first-time buyers under 30, abolishing business rates, trying to galvanise our high streets and get people to continue to operate businesses in commercial centres up and down the country. But I think most interestingly, a retreat from the triple lock, basically saying this is not sustainable anymore. So a very mixed bag there. What do you make of this fiscal package?
Well, as you say, I think you've outlined the main points. The only one that I would probably add to it is the huge cuts to welfare that Mel Stride is talking about. He's obviously a former welfare secretary and knows this stuff inside out. I think there's a real move, at least in policy terms, to get people back to work to try to end the sort of fit note, sick note culture that has happened, and to tackle mental health, not just through the health system, but also through the benefit system. And I think that Mel Stride knows that area best. And of course, the other measures that you mentioned are essentially he can say whatever he likes because the Conservatives are nowhere in the polls at the moment. He is unlikely to end up being Chancellor in 3 years' time if an election were to be held today. Of course, a lot can change, but nonetheless, I think it's good that there is a levelling with people, or an attempt anyway, to level with people and say the level of government spending that exists at the moment cannot continue. It's 44% of GDP is government spending at the moment, and that is something that is not good about in terms of the level of the number of people and the amount of money that go into the public service and the level of tax as well. Mel Stride and many others will be, of course, aware of the fact that there are some economists, not all of them, but some of them talking about things being even worse than we thought, and talking about bailouts and things like that in the IMF and so on. I think that's perhaps a bit much, but certainly when it comes to the 26th of November and the budget, Mel Stride has got to have a very worked out, thrashed out plan to get the black hole down, to get the fiscal problems sorted. And I think that what he is proposing today, at least there is some meat on the bone in that regard.
Well, I think that it's very interesting that he was bold enough to talk about, in the event that were the Conservatives to form the government, if they were to have to raise taxes, he would do so through income tax because it's the cleanest way. Obviously, trying
Yep.
to play a bit of a trap for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, when she stands up on the 26th of November with the entire country basically waiting for what they anticipate will be some sort of additional fiscal measure tax, whether that be through VAT or something else. Moving to something slightly differently now. I mean, there were a hell of a lot of seats lost at the last election to the Liberal Democrats. One might make the argument that a retreat from environmental obligations would be helpful to them, and that's something they would stick on their bumper stickers and literature going through doors. How do you think that's landed this week?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did a fringe event for the Conservative Environmental Network earlier, and I think when you combine the retreat from net zero, the reduction of the foreign aid commitment to 0.1% of GDP, a lot of that, there's a big Venn diagram between those two issues. And I think that all of that simply highlights the fact that immigration obviously is the number one issue in polling. And if you're going to deal with an issue like that, well, or you're going to make changes to the welfare system, for example, like we've just been talking about, well, things are going to have to change elsewhere in priorities. If some things are priorities, it means that other things aren't priorities. And I also think there is clear blue water now between the Conservatives and Labour on this. It was Theresa May who was very annoyed about this. She was Prime Minister when net zero went through and became law. The Labour Party is very clear on net zero. We have Miliband as Climate Secretary who's very, very committed to that. I also think from the Conservatives' point of view, they're looking over their shoulder at Reform UK. They can't change their entire being, but something like net zero, which Kemi Badenoch is not someone who philosophically believes in anyway, changing their mind on that, I think is kind of a small win. I mean, environmentalists will say this is existential, this is a massive issue, it has to be entirely at the heart of everything. That's fine, but from the perspective of people who are having many, many problems with the cost of living crisis, and small businesses that are dealing with national insurance rises, for example, well, they will be saying, if you're going to lumber us with a whole lot more regulation when it comes to net zero, we're not happy about that. Therefore, the Conservatives may well say that that's something that could be to their electoral advantage. Now, Conservatives, of course, want to conserve things. They want to conserve the environment to some degree, but not, they would argue, when it comes to putting a fiscal and straitjacket on many parts of the economy, to say that actually the whole financial system to some degree and the economy has to be changed to go towards net zero. And actually it may seem like a big thing, but actually it's perhaps a small win for the Conservatives, certainly in terms of how many people will view it as that.
I mean, this is the seesaw that they're trying to balance, right?
Yep.
They're trying to not alarm or jettison those that would be on the left wing of the party who might be Lib Dem leaners, while at the same time identifying the Farage-size hole in their voting electorate, which it takes us on to my last topic or question, which is the big one. So obviously, much trailed in advance of this conference, the decision to announced that the Conservatives would leave the ECHR, the Human Rights Act, and actually, interestingly, that every candidate standing on a Conservative ticket would have to commit to back this. The introduction of almost ICE style removals force, and Chris Philp in his speech today even saying that illegal immigrants will be removed within 1 week of their arrival to these shores. Now, this is obviously trying to out reform. Uh, do you think that this is going to create clear blue sea between Conservatives and Reform? I mean, my last point would be I sat next to a shadow cabinet member at lunch today who said, I feel like we're on a journey in terms of policy formation. The thing we absolutely need to do is punch through. Is this going to do it?
Yeah, it's fascinating, I think, in regard to the ECHR and certainly the policy and the candidate aspect of that as well, because the last time that happened to any real degree was in 2019 when the obligation was there for candidates in the Conservative Party to have signed up to the Brexit plan. So that's something that there'll be sort of echoes of that. And similarly, there's a kind of leave remain argument in that regard. Some people will say the Conservatives are sort of reform for slow learners in that Reform UK essentially had this policy some time ago, really since its formation, less than 2 years ago. So really, how big an electoral win that is, I'm not sure. But the point, I suppose, is lots of people won't really know what the ECHR is or understand what it really means. I mean, I put myself in that category because I'm not a legal expert on human rights law. But certainly in regard to what can be done on immigration as a result, well, there may well be an attempt to out reform on that, but I think there have been some very strong and bold policies. I'm not necessarily saying they're the right ones, but they've certainly been very bold from Chris Philp, talking about 750,000 people being essentially forcibly removed from this country over the course of a parliament. I mean, that is a huge number, and it's about 20 times the daily rate of getting people out of the country would need to be about 20 times what it is at the moment. Currently, we remove about 420 people a day, so it would need to be an awful lot more than
Yeah.
that to meet that target. So it's a really big plan. It's a bold plan. And actually, I think we're going to see a lot more of this and a lot more of this discussion because it's tangible, it's visible. And of course, when pollsters ask what's the number one issue facing the country, immigration is the number one issue.
Well, it is the number one issue. So my last addendum point, which would be, so there was a poll asking members attending this week, of which 64% favoured some form of pact with reform, and 46%, I'm quite astounded by the size of these numbers, for a full merger. What do you think of that?
I think it's not so much what I think, it's more what Reform UK thinks about it. If I were Reform UK, I would say they can want to merge with us as much as they want. They can want to have a pact with us as much as they want. They can talk about a coalition as much as they want. What is the advantage for Reform UK? So many Conservatives still have this mindset that they are, yeah, well, they are the opposition, of course, and that they're going to be the second largest party at the next election, or a possible coalition partner, and that Reform UK need them. Well, actually, yes, there have been many defections, and my inbox was buzzing this morning with 20 separate emails about all about Conservative councillors defecting to Reform UK. But Reform UK have the upper hand to such a degree at the moment that they will feel that they don't need the Conservatives, and actually, it could be a risk to them to see the Conservatives because so many people are turning away from the Conservatives, Labour, and what some people call the uni party idea, this idea that Labour, Conservatives, and Lib Dems are sort of all the same, and no matter what they promise, you always get the same outcome. So actually, the Conservatives may well see Reform UK as a lifeboat, whereas I think Reform UK may see them as something to throw overboard, or at least something that would drag them. So I'm not sure it's an equal. It wouldn't be an equal partnership in any regard.
I think that's probably right. And a week is a long time in politics. 3 years a lifetime. Turkeys don't
Well,
vote for Christmas.
this time 3 years ago, people were predicting Boris Johnson would have a historic fifth term for the Conservatives. So it's always worth remembering that.
Indeed, and I mean, those that are optimistic have also pointed out to me the SDLP had an enormous lead of something like 50 points in the beginning of the 1980. I'm going to say three or something like that, and obviously look how that ended up. But as it currently stands, there will be those looking over their shoulder, thinking that reform are a very attractive proposition. What I think, I hope that a Lotto Leaders Opposition Office will be thinking about is the spending commitments that the Reform Party have already announced amount to billions of multiples of 10 I cannot begin to imagine, and that people need to start scrutinizing that in a very forensic way, because ultimately, how's all this going to be paid for? But I think that's probably a story for another day. I think
Well,
that's
it's a very good point, and actually, just as a final thought from me, Kemi Badenoch, I think one of her best lines, which should be trotted out again, is when she criticised Reform UK and said it's Corbynism with a Union Jack. If she keeps saying stuff like that, people might just start listening to her.
Well, let's hope so. I think that's a pretty good synopsis of where we are today. It's been a long conference, they always are, but thank you very much, Peter, for once again joining us. As ever, we like to deliver these things from the coalface. So if there are questions arising as a result of the Conservative Party conference or Labour or the Liberal Democrats or and this entire conference season, you know where to find us. But thank you once again for listening in. And Peter, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Liam.